Hey guys, welcome to Bethel Online. My name is Jason. I'm one of the pastors here, and we're so glad you decided to make us a part of your weekend. No matter who you are, where you come from, we're so glad you're here. Our vision is to be a safe place for real people to encounter the real Jesus and experience real change. Our hope and our prayer is that no matter who you are or what you've been through, you know that you are loved and you are wanted here. We would love to get to know you better and help you connect with all that's going on. You can do this by going to our website at www.bethel.us or by downloading the Bethel app. You can find our app by searching Bethel Putco in your app store. Both online and in the app, you can fill out digital connection card. It only takes a minute and it'll help us know how to serve you better. Another way you can connect today is through giving. Your generosity at Bethel directly impacts God's mission to radically change people's lives in Putnam County and beyond. Through the ministries of Bethel and the many local and regional organizations we support, people are able to see the grace of God and how much He loves them. You can always give on our website at bethel.us/give or in the Bethel app. Thank you for partnering with us and making a difference. Well, thanks again for tuning in online today. Know that you are wanted and welcome here, and you are loved. I hope you all have a great day.
Hey, good morning, Bethel Online. I'm excited to be with you today. My name is Aaron. I'm the worship pastor, and we're getting ready to start a brand new series called Peace Under Pressure. Now, there's just a time where we need peace in their lives. There's so many times we're feeling the pressures or the weight of the world around us. So how do we find that peace? How do we connect once again with who God is and what He wants to do in our lives? And we're going to kick off this series. I'm going to talk about doubts. What do we do with our doubts or our questions or our fears? And it was always interesting to me when I get ready to preach on something, how God takes me down a road and teaches me something through that message, even before I have a chance to preach it. You see, this past Sunday, we showed up to church and, man, everything on the worship side was going wrong. The internet was down. Anything we tried to connect to on the stage was not working. We used iPads and phones on the stage for our charts to know what we're supposed to play. None of that would connect. Our pedals wouldn't connect. Our computer on the stage wouldn't connect with the computer in the back of the room so that the slides would change when they need to. There was a lot that seemed to be going wrong. And man, let me go and tell you, doubt entered my mind over and over. We had 12 songs we were going to go through this past Sunday because we had a baptism service where we were expecting 30 to be baptized. We only got to rehearse 4 of those songs. My mind was going crazy, and I had a lot of fears, and I had a lot of doubts, and I had a lot of worry. And then God showed up. When we were going to baptize 30 that we had on our list, it was opened up to anybody else who really felt that call, who'd given their life to Jesus and wanted to take their next step in baptism. And 23 more people lined up to be baptized. Let me go ahead and tell you, man, my doubts diminished. God just took over. And He showed up in the moment and blew us all away. Maybe you have doubts sometimes. Maybe you have seasons where you're walking through some stuff and some fears and some doubts can creep in. Like maybe sometimes, have you ever been in a church service where the pastor asks everybody to bow their heads and close their eyes and pray? But maybe you find yourself kind of peeking or looking around the room. You're not the only one, I promise you. And everyone else has their eyes closed and their heads bowed, and they all seem to really be connecting to God so easily. Like they seem to be feeling His presence in the room so often and to be sure that He's listening. Or do you ever see people in worship who are singing loud and maybe they're lifting hands in worship as if Jesus was standing right in front of them? Yet maybe you or me, on the other hand, feel like we're the only one in the room who struggles with feelings of doubt. Doubt about His existence, doubt about God's faithfulness, or His ability to keep the promises of His word. or maybe even his desire to save you. See, doubt has a way of isolating us from other believers. That's why when it comes to doubt, I think it's helpful if we will take a step and realize that you're not alone. We're not alone with questions and doubts. In fact, some of the greatest men and women of the Bible experienced seasons of doubts. We're going to look at a few of those today. Hey, look at John the Baptist. You remember John? He was the hairy guy who lived out in the wilderness and liked to eat locusts. See, John was a radical follower of Jesus, even before Jesus began his earthly ministry. He was sold out. He boldly proclaimed that Jesus was the Messiah, and yet when he was imprisoned for his faith, he had doubts. Look in Matthew 11, verse 2 and 3. It says, John the Baptist, who was in prison, heard about all the things the Messiah was doing. Remember, he was a follower. He was a believer. So he sent his disciples to ask Jesus. And he asked him this, hey, are you the Messiah we've been expecting? Or should we keep looking for someone else? Like John was literally saying, are you really the Messiah? Our circumstances can cause us to doubt. You remember the Israelites? Like they would see God's power on display and dedicate themselves to him, and then times would get tough, things would be rough, and they would start to doubt that God was good. Look at it in Exodus 17. But tormented by thirst, the Israelites continued to argue with Moses. Why did you bring us out of Egypt? Are you trying to kill us, our children, and our livestock with thirst? See, their beef was really with God. Moses was just the front man for him at this point. And they were doubting not just God's ability, but also his willingness to provide for their needs. Like sometimes we believe God can do it, but we're just not sure that he's going to, or that he wants to, or that he will step in. And their circumstances lead them to have doubts. Remember Peter? Like Peter was stepped out of the boat to come to Jesus because Jesus had called him. But when the wind kicked up, when he stepped out on the water, he began to sink into the sea because he had doubts and he took his eyes off of Jesus. What about Judas? He had so many doubts, he sold out Jesus for cash. And then there was Mary, who thought Jesus' body was stolen. But the one we're going to spend most of the time on today is a guy by the name of Thomas. Thomas was maybe the most famous doubter in the Bible. Like they called him Doubting Thomas. He was a doubter for sure. But what we're going to see is that his doubts had a purpose. He wanted to know the truth. And I really believe this, that we should thank God for the example of Doubting Thomas. Because we all have doubts. Doubts always come up from time to time. And from his story, from Thomas's story, we're going to receive both encouragement and instruction on what to do with our doubts. So, let's look at his story. We pick it up in John chapter 20, verse 19. Now this is right after the crucifixion and the resurrection of Jesus. And it says that Sunday evening, the disciples were meeting behind locked doors because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders. And suddenly, Jesus was standing there among them. "Peace be with you," he said. Now, as he spoke, he showed them the wounds in his hands and his side. They were filled with joy when they saw the Lord. Verse 21, again he said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you." Now check this out. We're going to go to verse 24. Now Thomas, also known as Didymus, which means twin, one of the 12, he was one of the disciples, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. This is important. So verse 25, the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, Thomas said, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." And let's just be honest. I think sometimes we can feel the same way. Sometimes we'll have those doubts. Maybe it's because of some past hurts and some circumstances. Look, maybe you don't buy all this Jesus stuff as much as you would like to. And maybe like Thomas, you would if only you could see him or touch him. You just need a little more than what you've gotten so far. Man, I get it. But the good news is this. There's more to Thomas than meets the eye. There is encouragement that we can gain from his story. And we're going to look at 3 stages of Thomas's life. Here we go. Number 1, the tales of a believer. See, Thomas appears 3 times in the book of John. His first appearance is actually in John 11. Jesus is in Jericho. He's preparing to go to Bethany to raise Lazarus from the dead. But his disciples, they aren't thrilled. They're not thrilled about his plan. So John 11:8 says this, "Only a few days ago, the Jewish leaders in Judea were trying to kill you. Are you going there again?" And I love this because Thomas speaks up in verse 16. Then Thomas said to the rest of the disciples, "Let us also go, that we may die with him." See, John is telling us something important about Thomas here. Thomas was devoted to Jesus, even to the point of dying. Yes, he had doubts that come up. He had questions. He had concerns. He had fears. He's just like you and me. But we have to understand he was also devoted to Jesus, even to the point of dying. Now his second appearance, Thomas's second appearance, comes the night before Jesus died. Jesus had just finished washing his disciples' feet, and he says this in John 14. This is Jesus. "I'm going to prepare a place for you. When everything is ready, I will come and get you so that you will always be with me where I am." And I love verse 4. "And you know the way to where I'm going." Now, this didn't make any sense to the disciples, but everyone was quiet. They didn't know what Jesus meant. They actually didn't know where he was going. So Thomas, he speaks up again. Look in verse 5. "No, we don't know, Lord." Thomas said, "We have no idea where you're going. So how can we know the way?" This is another great thing that we have to learn about Thomas. When everyone else sat dumbfounded, Thomas brought an honest question to Jesus. See, for him, it wasn't enough just to sit there not knowing. Thomas needed more. Thomas needed some clarity. So this tells us something else about Thomas. Look, Thomas was a genuine seeker, and he was an honest asker. He would rather speak up and wrestle with the truth than sit silently in the dark. Man, we're learning more about Thomas. Not just that he was doubting, but he wanted to know more. He wanted to know the truth. And he was genuine and he was honest. Here's the second stage, number 2, the doubt of a believer. Now, the 2 encounters that we just talked about between Jesus and Thomas laid the foundation for his third encounter. It's a climactic moment in their relationship. A lot had happened in the next couple of weeks. Like Thomas had had his feet washed by Jesus. He'd seen Peter slice the ear off of a temple guard. And he fumed as Judas sold out their group. Then remember this, check this out. He watched Jesus be carried away in shackles. He heard all about his beating and the crucifixion. And he learned about his lifeless body that was left in a tomb. After Jesus died, the rest of the disciples were together, but Thomas wasn't with them. You know, I'm guessing, and it's just guessing, that for somebody like Thomas that needed more, that was honest and was seeking out the truth, I'm guessing this was all just too much for Thomas to bear. And people grieve differently. Some people grieve with companions, but Thomas needed to be alone. Like we know by now that Thomas was a thinker. And sometimes we can do our best thinking when we're by ourselves. Like he's a thinker and he asks questions. Look, he simply did not have enough evidence to give him hope. And so he doubted. Have you been there? Man, I've been there. And for people like Thomas, it's not enough to hear there's something to believe in. He had to know it for himself. Thomas's conditions for belief were crystal clear. Look in verse 25. Remember? Unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand into his side, he says, I will not believe. And man, I don't blame Thomas for even a second for needing more to believe. And I am glad that he spoke up. I am glad that he was looking for answers and that he used his voice to speak up to let him know he needed more. Silent doubts rarely find answers. As a matter of fact, I think it is better to doubt out loud than to disbelieve in silence. Just a few years ago, many of you maybe know this story, but I stepped into a surgery room to have what was supposed to be a very simple hernia surgery. The problem was, during surgery, they punctured my bowel and didn't catch it. They sent me home, and 8 days later, I was rushed to the hospital to begin a 33-day journey in the hospital where there was 8 emergency surgeries. They told my wife that I wasn't going to make it. I had necrotizing fasciitis all through my stomach area, and it had gone into my back. That's why they didn't think that I would be able to be saved. I spent 2 weeks on a vent, longer than that in the ICU. Man, I had a lot of doubts. This was supposed to be a simple thing. And can I just be honest with you? Even today, I still struggle with doubt. I struggle, did I do the right thing? Should I have really gone in for that surgery? I struggle with, what was this for? What is the reason? Listen, I know the scripture and I know the truths that God speaks in there. And I really do believe that he uses our pain for good. I do believe that. But man, when you're the one in the middle of that situation, sometimes we need more than just words. And so I doubt, man, God, are you really going to use this for my good? Because I don't see it right now. Maybe it just takes longer. Maybe there's more years of healing before we see what God is going to do with our pain. But I'm there. Man, I am there with Thomas. And I have doubted in silence for a long time. And my hope is that as God works on me, that he's going to work on you too. And begin to doubt more out loud. Because that is better than to just disbelieve in silence. The third thing we see, the tales of Thomas, is the belief of a believer. Man, I love when Jesus steps into our stories. And he steps in right here with Thomas. And look, Jesus knew exactly what Thomas needed. And in typical Jesus fashion, he cut to the heart of the matter without wasting any time. Like Jesus singled Thomas out and he told him 2 things. He said, first, have peace. And second, touch my hands. Man, I love this. Look at verse 26. A week later, his disciples were in the house again and Thomas was with them. He was there this time. This is big. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them. And he said, here it is, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here. Thomas, I know what you need. I know you need more proof. Thomas, see my hands. Thomas, reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe. Like he didn't ridicule Thomas. He didn't say, Thomas, how dare you? Like, I'm not going to give you more proof, Thomas. Just believe. No, no, no. He showed him exactly what Thomas needed to believe. Verse 28, Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God. Like there it was. That's what he needed in that moment. In other words, Thomas said, I believe. Jesus knew exactly what Thomas needed. And he met Thomas right where he was, in the middle of his questions and in the middle of his doubts. And listen, Jesus knows your conditions for belief also. And he's willing and he is able to meet you there. Jesus is a safe place to bring your doubts because all he requires is as much faith as you have and as much of him as you know. And let's be honest, sometimes all the faith that you have is as plentiful as a widow's mite. Sometimes it's as loud as a whisper. It's as big as a mustard seed. But with Jesus, that's enough. So here's our challenge. Look, bring whatever you have. Even if it's empty hands and more questions than you think there are answers to, bring it to the feet of Jesus and watch what he can do with it. I love you, Bethel. Have a great week.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Are you ready to take your next step? We would love to hear from you. You can send an email to hello@bethel.us. You can send us a message on Facebook, or you can let us know in the Bethel app. And speaking of the Bethel app, take a moment, if you haven't already, to go to your app store and search Bethel Putco to download our app. There's all kinds of great resources in the app. You can listen to messages, you can view the messages from Sunday morning, and you can also fill out a digital Connect card. You can do that today and each week to let us know that you're tuning in. You can also find some great information about our Bethel Kids Ministry and our Be the One student ministries. Also in the app, you can give. It's one of 3 ways you can give, with online giving at bethel.us/give, in our app, Bethel Putco, or through text. Hey, thanks again for joining us. We hope you have a great day and know that you are loved.